In the early 1600s, the place we now call New York City was originally a Dutch settlement known as New Amsterdam. It flourished as a small trading post established by the Dutch West India Company in 1624, right at the southern tip of Manhattan Island. The settlement was strategically important for trade, particularly the fur industry, and had a diverse population including the Dutch, several African individuals, some of whom were enslaved, and indigenous peoples who lived there prior to European colonization. The city's early layout was modest, marked by narrow, cobblestone streets, wooden structures, and a straightforward grid pattern. Fast forward to 1664, the British seized control, and the city was renamed New York in recognition of the Duke of York, who would later become King James II. Under British rule, New York's growth continued, with the introduction of more permanent structures made of brick and stone. Thanks to its strategic port, New York became a burgeoning hub for trade between the American colonies and Europe. The city's street plan began to develop, though it remained far from the intensive grid system introduced later. The 18th century marked New York's expanding horizons as immigration boomed, infusing diverse cultures and adding complexity to society. By the time the American Revolution ignited in 1775, New York was pivotal in political and economic arenas. The city witnessed battles with some areas damaged in the discord. Following the conflict, New York briefly held the title of the first U.S. capital from 1785 to 1790. It was during this time that George Washington took the oath as the first president at Federal Hall on Wall Street. In the early 19th century, New York's face transformed rapidly. A major catalyst for change was the completion of the Erie Canal in 1825, which connected the Hudson River to the Great Lakes. This project catapulted New York into an economic powerhouse within the United States. Concurrently, a significant influx of European immigrants, especially from Ireland and Germany, swelled the population. Lower Manhattan evolved into a dense urban pocket as tenements sprang up, housing those eager to labor in the city's factories, shipping yards, and docks. As the 19th century progressed, New York's skyline began expanding with iconic structures and citywide growth. The introduction of the Commissioner's Plan in 1811 laid down the famous grid system that still characterizes Manhattan today. This plan was a bid for more predictable urban development, setting the stage for dramatic growth ahead. New technologies like steam power heralded the first elevated railways by the late 19th century, altering city dynamics and aiding further expansion. Entering the 20th century, New York was a city of tremendous contrasts. Despite its rise as a global financial and cultural nucleus, it was still ravaged by poverty and overcrowding. Lower Manhattan was densely packed with immigrants trapped in unsanitary tenement blocks. Overcrowding and inadequate living conditions prevailed, prompting early reform movements aimed at improving resident welfare. Amongst the stark cityscape rose new skyscrapers like the Empire State Building in the 1930s, which at its time of completion was the tallest edifice globally. Before modern development swept through, New York's architectural style was largely of brick and stone, with buildings rarely exceeding modest heights. Transportation leaned heavily on horse-drawn carriages, trolleys, and ferries until the first subway line opened in 1904, revolutionizing urban travel.